Hello students, this is a class of Sem-II English Literature. Our topic today is Metaphysical Poetry with special reference to John Donne. We are going to look at John Donne's poetry and how John Donne created an entire school of metaphysical poets. So in this class, we will look at the introduction, the general introduction to metaphysical poetry of John Donne and others. I will tell you that before reading metaphysical poetry, we have to first look at the background, the critical background to metaphysical poetry, because metaphysical poets suffered a lot of, the ups and downs in their reputation. They were quite well known during the early 17th century to mid and late 17th century. But thereafter, they suffered a fall in their reputation and they were almost in oblivion for centuries. And metaphysical poets were revived again in the 20th century by T.S. Eliot in his literary criticism, as well as Herbert J. Grierson. So these two names, T.S. Eliot and Herbert J. Grierson, are extremely important to the revival of metaphysical poetry. And today we will look at a critical tradition, how metaphysical poets were received from the very beginning, their own times, and throughout centuries till our times. So I will first tell you about Dr. Samuel Johnson, how Dr. Samuel Johnson was writing a few decades after the metaphysical poets, after the particular tendency ended. Dr. Samuel Johnson was a very important critic, and he was the first compiler of English dictionary, and he was a dramatist as well, and a very important and powerful critic of literature. So this is what Dr. Samuel Johnson tells us about metaphysical poets in the life of Cowley, in his Lives of Poets. Please take a note. About the beginning of the 17th century appeared a race of writers that may be termed the metaphysical poets. The metaphysical poets were men of learning, and to show their learning was their whole endeavor. So as you can see, negative. This is a negative criticism of metaphysical poets, that they were men of learning, and to show their learning was their whole endeavor. But unluckily, resolving to show it in rhyme, instead of writing poetry, they wrote only verses. And very often, such verses as stood the trial of fingers better than the ear. So this is devastating, negative criticism, that these poets were men of learning, and their only aim was to show their learning, their only aim was to show their knowledge. And instead of writing poetry, they only created verses. I think you understand what is the difference between poetry as we understand it and only verses, that is only making rhymes. So according to Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson, that these poets knew how to make rhymes, they knew how to make verses, but they were not poets at all. They did not have the power of imagination or the power of creating a wholeness of experience that he tells us later in this criticism. And they created such verses as stood the trial of fingers rather than ear. So they were not melodious at all. You count their verses, you find their syllable, you count the syllable, you understand the verse, but they are not melodious at all. So rough verses where they have not kept the accent properly. For the modulation was so imperfect that they were only found to be verse by counting the syllables. Okay. If the father of criticism rightly denominated poetry as imitative art, these writers will, without great wrong, lose their right to the name of poets. So father of criticism, as you know, refers to Aristotle. So according to Aristotle, poetry should be imitative art, which imitates nature. But for Dr. Samuel Johnson, that metaphysical poets, they could not imitate nature properly. Therefore, they don't deserve the name of poets at all. For they cannot be said to have imitated anything They neither copied nature nor life, neither painted the forms of matter, nor represented the operating of intellect. Thus, the metaphysical poets are, for Dr. Samuel Johnson, they are just witty, playful, and clever. They can make verses, but they are not to be called poets in the true sense of the term. And he goes on, those, however, who deny them to be poets, allow them to be wits. So they are wits rather than poets. That is what Dr. Samuel Johnson thinks about the metaphysical poets. They endeavored to be singular in their thoughts and were careless about their diction. So their diction was not proper for poetry, and they only tried to be clever. They only tried to express clever things, things which nobody has said before. They wanted to say things which are fresh, but in the process of trying to say something fresh, they lost their touch with the genuine poetry. So their diction is careless, their versification is rough, and their melody, they are lacking melody, they are not melodious enough. And what he continues to say is that their thoughts are often new but seldom natural. So they say something that is new, that may be fresh, but that is not natural. So they deal with things which are quite awkward or quite ingenuine. A combination of dissimilar images, this you have to take note, a very important observation which we call metaphysical conceit. Okay, what is metaphysical conceit? That these poets find similarities in places where we generally don't find any similarity. And this similarity they express in the form of what is called metaphysical conceit. So please take note of this. A combination of dissimilar images, a discovery of occult resemblances in things apparently unlike. The most heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. So combination of dissimilar images and discovery of occult resemblances, and most heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. So they forced their similes rather than they found genuine similarity between things which are apparently unlike. So their this ingenuine style of finding resemblances in things which are apparently unlike, which are dissimilar, where we don't generally find similarity, is what Dr. Samuel Johnson calls their conceit, the metaphysical conceit. Okay, so we will discuss conceit later when we see the major features of metaphysics. So as of now, I'm trying to focus on the critical tradition on metaphysical poetry, how metaphysical poets were received in different ways throughout the centuries. I think we should also look at this Interestingly enough, Thomas Kerry, who was a contemporary of John Dunn, and he wrote an elegy upon the death of John Dunn, which is called, please take note, an elegy upon the death of the Dean of St. Paul's, Dr. John Dunn. In this elegy, in this particular stanza, Thomas Kerry has summed up the major features of John Donne's poetry, or the role of John Donne as a reformer of poetry. He was reforming the field of poetry. He was reforming the garden of the muse. Take a listen, I will just read out. The muse's garden with pedantic weeds overspread was parched by thee, the lazy seeds of servile imitation thrown away, and fresh inventions planted. So the muse's garden with pedantic weeds overspread was purged by thee. That means you cleared the garden of poetry of pedantic weeds, unnecessary scholasticism, and the servile imitation thrown away. You came out of the imitative poetry. You came out of the Elizabethan tradition of writing imitative verse, and fresh inventions planted. You planted new inventions. You planted, or you created new style of writing poetry. So this is, I think, a genuine criticism of John Donne. It was done by his contemporary Thomas Kerry. Therefore, we have to then try to understand that these two ideas of poetry are different. What Thomas Kerry is trying to focus on, and what Dr. Samuel Johnson is negative about, I cannot say that, or we cannot say that Dr. Johnson was wrong, or we cannot say that Thomas Kerry was not right in his appreciation. Both of them were right, but their views were different. So what Thomas Kerry found to be inventive or genuine poetry, Dr. Johnson found to be artificial poetry. Okay, so we have to therefore keep in mind that critical tradition of how the critics tried to evaluate metaphysical poetry with their own unique ways before we form our own judgment. And I will also be telling you about T.S. Eliot, 20th century critic, in his tradition and individual talent, and in his Metaphysical Poets, the particular essay called The Metaphysical Poets, which T.S. Eliot wrote to revive the tradition of metaphysical poetry, because for T.S. Eliot, the metaphysical poets were genuine poets. They were highly creative, they were independent, they were individual talents. And especially John Donne, he was a poet of considerable talent, and therefore he created an entire tradition of writing poetry, a tradition which was different from the Elizabethan commonplace verses. So therefore we have to keep in mind the critical tradition before coming to our own judgment of metaphysical poetry. So I will ask you to write down these important names in order to read further about metaphysical poetry. Please write down Dr. Samuel Johnson in the 18th century, T.S. Eliot in the 20th century, Herbert J. Grierson, once again in the 20th century, and another very important name, we will be looking at this name later, criticism later, by Clint Brooks. Please write down Clint Brooks, B-R-O-O-K-S, Clint Brooks. Clint Brooks' heresy of paraphrase, where Brooks has tried to show how the metaphysical poets, particularly John Donne, they created brilliant paradoxes which are quite impossible to translate into paraphrase. They cannot be paraphrased. And how Donne created the unique style of writing, epigrammatic verses. It's a detailed criticism which comes in Clint Brooks' The Well-Wrought Urn. I will ask you to write down this name as well. This is the name of the entire volume of criticism in which you find the heresy of paraphrase. So please write down The Well-Wrought Urn, The Well-Wrought Urn by Clint Brooks, and the particular chapter is the heresy of paraphrase, where you find Brooks' criticism of John Donne and the metaphysical poets. Incidentally, I should tell you that Brooks was a new critic. He created a new tradition of criticism, an American critic, and we will look at this new critical tendency of judging metaphysical poetry later. But as of now, we concentrate on the text of metaphysical poetry. So we begin with John Donne. Donne was the pioneer. He was the leader of metaphysical poets, and he lived at a time when England was going through a lot of turbulence. It was a time of England's exploration, navigation, when the English people were navigating throughout the world, and they were finding new lands in order to expand their territory and their business. And this was the time of English people's conflict with the Spanish. As you know, the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1590s. So, and time of Queen Elizabeth. This was the time of Queen Elizabeth in England. England was deeply divided between Protestantism and Catholicism. The Catholics were a minority, and they were persecuted, they were oppressed, and Catholic faith was illegal in England. And Donne was born in a Catholic family. His father was a Catholic, and he was born in 1572 in England, when Catholicism was quite illegal. So Catholics had to face a lot of discrimination, a lot of dangers in the outside society. Catholics had their own society, and they were a minority, a severe minority. So we will look at this background to John Donne and the historical background of Elizabethan age later in detail, as of now, we should look at the text, a few texts of John Donne, with a view to judge the criticism of Dr. Samuel Johnson, and we will also look at T.S. Eliot later. So let us first see a few poems of John Donne, which I think will help you to understand Donne better and to evaluate for yourself. Now you have to do two things. First of all, you have to read the texts and you have to form your own judgment, your own evaluation. At the same time, you are going to look at the critical tradition, the entire critical tradition on John Donne, beginning from the, I should say, 18th century till our times. So there are a few interesting poems which I have collected together. So let us see a few of these poems. I think you have in your syllabus, you have the canonization of John Donne, which we will look at later. As of now, I should read this out. Please try to listen. This is the anniversary, John Donne. How John Donne is different from the Elizabethan poets like Shakespeare, Spenser, and Sir Philip Sidney. It is hardly, possible to believe. Sometimes it's very difficult, to believe that Donne was a contemporary of Spenser, who was so archaic, so melodious, and so traditional in his poetry, in his genres, in his versification. And John Donne was so inventive. He broke all rules, and he was unique. And he wrote in verses which are entirely different and entirely contradictory to those of the tradition of Spenser. Okay, so it's very difficult to take that Donne was a contemporary of either Spenser or Sir Philip Sidney or Shakespeare. Okay, this is the anniversary. Please take a listen. All kings and all their favorites, all glory of honors, beauties, wits, the sun itself which makes times as this pass is elder by a year now than it was. When thou and I first one another saw, all other things to their destructions draw, only our love hath no decay, this no tomorrow hath, not nor yesterday. Running it never runs us away, but truly keeps his fast, last, everlasting day. This was a poem which Donne was writing to commemorate the anniversary of their love affair, of their marriage, John Donne and Anne Donne. Anne Donne, who was the daughter of a Protestant and a very important member of English Protestant society, Sir Thomas More. She was Anne More. After marriage with John Donne, became Anne Donne. And this marriage was a complete mismatch because Donne was actually a Catholic who later converted to Protestantism, but still Donne's faith was not quite established because he had a background of Catholicism. And secondly, Donne did not have a very good reputation in a decent society. He was called a very, he was a libertine. He used to write what would be called indecent verses in his time, during his time, and he was a frequenter to theatre. He did not have a aristocratic background in that sense as Anne More had. So because of this marriage, which was a secret marriage, John Donne lost his position, he lost his job, he lost his employment, he was thrown out, he was fired from his employment, and he wrote in a letter, John Donne, Anne Donne, undone. So he sacrificed his career even for his love affair. He was passionate, definitely. We cannot say that he was always witty or he was always trying to say something in a way that is fresh. He was not genuine. But if you look at his personal life, he was passionate. He had a passion of love that he sacrificed his career, his prospect due to his marriage. So this was a poem. He was celebrating his affair, his marriage with Anne Donne. And we call these metaphysical poems. Why we call these poems metaphysical? It can be debatable because the term metaphysical, as you know, is actually from philosophy, metaphysical philosophy. In Greece, Plato, Aristotle, they all dealt with metaphysics very often, dealing with the nature of existence. So, but whether these poets should be called metaphysical or how far they should be called metaphysical, what is the justice of these poets being called metaphysical poets, that is a debatable, a controversial question. We will look at this controversy also later on. But as I can tell you, metaphysical is a word, is a combination of two terms, meta and physical, Greek terms. Meta means beyond, and physical means the material, the commonplace. Beyond the commonplace, beyond the natural, beyond the material, that is what metaphysical is. So if you look at the metaphysical argument, their argument, I think you know To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell, where Marvell deals with the question of what is called carpe diem, that the theme of gather ye rosebuds while ye may, the old flower, the old time is still flying, and the same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. So gather ye rosebuds while ye may, enjoy your day, seize your day, and don't delay, don't ponder, but be active in your love. Enjoy your love while you are young. So in the course of this discussion, Marvell deals with a lot of philosophical speculation. What happens to our souls after death, and what happens to us when we grow old? What happens to us when we die without being loved? So these are the questions that are fundamental to the nature of existence. Therefore, the metaphysical element, I think, is definitely present in such poems as Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress. And if you look at this poem, the poet continues, two graves must hide thine and my corses. If one might, death were no divorce. Alas, as well all other princes we, who prince enough in one another be, must leave at last in death these eyes and ears, oft fed with true oaths and with sweet salt tears. But souls where nothing dwells but love, all other things, all other thoughts, bring in mates, then shall prove this or a love increased there above, when bodies to their graves, souls from their graves remove. So we die, we will die, because time is running and we cannot stop time. Time is beyond our control, and we are all destined to die, and our bodies will be hidden in our graves. And when we will be in our graves, we cannot embrace each other, we cannot hug each other. But the metaphysical element is prominent here, as you can see. When bodies to their graves, souls from their graves remove. So when bodies go to their graves, what happens? Souls come out of their bodies. So bodies are actually an imprisonment of the souls. So souls come out of their bodies and souls become free, and then souls will embrace each other. So we will meet the better, we will unite with each other the better after death, because we will not have this bodily constraint, the physical barrier we will not have. So if we will, death will be no divorce. Death is not a separation, but in death we will be free to meet each other without any bodily constraints. So this is the metaphysical, that is going beyond the physical. They transcend the physical, they transcend the material, they transcend the natural and commonplace. Their thought pattern is therefore speculative. Their thought pattern, they think on a philosophical line, they think something beyond the commonplace. Therefore they are called the metaphysicals. We will look at a few more poems, okay? And I will ask you to please note down the names of these poems so that you can read for yourself. And I will suggest you this book. Please take a note. This book is called The Metaphysical Poets, The Metaphysical Poets by Helen Gardner. Please write down The Metaphysical Poets. This is actually a critical anthology selected and edited by Helen Gardner, H-E-L-E-N, Helen Gardner, G-A-R-D-N-E-R. This is, I think, one of the best anthologies of metaphysical poetry, and it comes with a brilliant introduction. If you read this, I think it will help you to understand the major tendencies of metaphysical poetry, okay, of the 17th century. So if you continue reading Dr. Johnson's criticism, what Dr. Johnson says that their thoughts are new, but they are not natural. they're quite unnatural, and the kind of comparison that they deal with, the comparisons are not very understandable. Their comparisons are awkward, their comparisons are striking, but like, yoked together violently. They are like forced comparisons. If you read this poem, another poem I will suggest, here you find that a few of the important metaphysical concepts. Yes, this is a valediction forbidding mourning. Please write down a valediction forbidding mourning. This was written at a time when John Donne and his beloved wife, Anne Donne, they were about to be separated, and Donne calls upon Anne Donne not to weep, not to break down. So a valediction forbidding mourning. Don't weep when I go away. In this poem, Donne compares two lovers with the legs of a compass. Now this is evidently what we call metaphysical concept, because here you find that we don't find any similarities between two individuals, two human beings, two lovers, and a pair of compass, legs of compass. So how do you actually bring these two ideas together? How lovers can be compared with legs of compass? But if you read it, if you think deeply about it, just like two legs of a compass, they are folded together, they are open together, and they cannot go away from each other. Maybe they are stretched, I mean, they go away, slightly away from each other, but they cannot break up, they cannot run away from each other. They will always be joined together at the center. And when the center leg is steady, when the center leg is always steady at the center, then the circle will be complete. So my circle will not be complete. I may go away from you, but I will always revolve around you. Okay, I will always run around you, and my circle will only be complete when you are steady, and together we make this circle complete, this circle a perfect circle of love. So therefore I think if you think deeply about this, this is a genuine comparison. This is witty, as at the same time this is a true comparison. This comparison has the elements of a deep understanding of love and passion, and at the same time they show how thoughts can be fresh, thoughts can be new, because the Elizabethan, if you look at the traditional poetry of the Elizabethans, they always deal with traditional imagery. Their comparisons are traditional, commonplace, and cliche, which are too often used. But here you find fresh style of writing, fresh comparisons, fresh imagery. Therefore, this element of metaphysical poetry, that their freshness of thought, that is, I think, the most striking element of metaphysical poetry. Okay, I will read this poem. Please take a listen. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their friends do say, now his breath goes, and some say no. So let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. It were profanities of our love to tell the laity. So please take down the name of this poem, which you will read later. As of now, I'm just reading out for you. Please take a listen. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, whilst some of their friends do say, now his breath goes, and some says no. So let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. It were profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. So as virtuous men die without making any hue and cry, so let us go away from each other in our separation. Don't cry, don't make a sin, don't create a sin. So let us mildly pass away from each other. Let us go away from each other without making a noise, without making any tear floods. So let us go away, but like virtuous men, go away silently. Dull sublunary lovers love, where soul is sense, cannot admit of absence, cause it doth remove the thing which elemented it. So, dull sublunary lovers, lovers who depend on the physical, who depend on the sense only, they cannot bear the separation, because for them the body matter, but for us body does not matter. So in our separation we will be together, our souls will be together. So we don't care for our body. Okay, so dull sublunary lovers love whose soul is sense. They are sensual lovers, but we are intellectual lovers. We are lovers who don't need the physical, for whom physical touch is not essential. So we can love even being away from each other. So they cannot endure absence, the dull sublunary lovers, but we will, in our absence, we will be even together. But we, by a love so refined that ourselves know not what it is, interassured of the mind, careless eyes, lips, and hands to miss. So we don't care for eyes, lips, or hands, the physical aspects. We don't care for the sensual aspects. We are lovers of soul, superior lovers. So interassured of the mind, we are assured of each other's mind, careless eyes, lips, and hands to miss, which the dull sublunary lovers care a lot. We don't care, because we love each other through our souls. Our love is a refined love. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach but an expansion, like gold to airy thinness beat. So our two souls, you find that how fine is this comparison, how fine is this imagination. Our two souls, therefore, which are one. Our two souls are not two, our two souls are one. We are one. Though I must go, I will go away from you. I have to go away from you at this moment. But in our separation, we endure an expansion, not a breach. We don't break, but we expand. Our love gets expanded in our separation. It is not broken. So just like a leaf of gold, which is beat to airy thinness. Okay, when the goldsmith beat the leaf of gold, it becomes thin, but it never breaks. So our love is like that. It never breaks. Rather, in our separation, our love will be expanded to the horizons. It will not suffer a break. So how interesting and how beautiful this comparison, if you just can imagine. If they be two, now you find here that metaphysical poets are extremely argumentative. They love to argue. They are not just satisfied with a brilliant imagery. They are not just satisfied with a brilliant conceit, but they are always writing in a mode of debate. They are like, arguing. They have some point to prove. So therefore, if they be two, if our souls are two, they are two so as stiff twine compasses are two. They are like two legs of a compass. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth if the other do. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth move, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. As I explained, so when you are steady, my circle is complete. We are like two legs of a compass, and we both together make our circle complete. Without your steadfast love and without my obedience to your love, the circle of love will not be complete. So in that sense, it's a beautiful comparison. It's a brilliant, innovative metaphor that Dunn is using here. But it needs some amount of intellect. So to understand John Donne, to understand metaphysical poetry, you need to apply your intellect, because metaphysical poets are intellectual. They are witty, and they are epigrammatic. Sometimes they are paradoxical. They are self-contradictory. So it needs a bit of intellectual analysis to properly appreciate the metaphysical poets. So other poets, like for example, after this brilliant imagery of the goldsmith, of the beating of the gold leaf, other poets would have probably stopped there, because that would be a fine way to stop your poem, to end your poem with a brilliant imagery. But the metaphysical poets continue. They continue their debate, they expand their debate. And therefore we find that this is a major feature of metaphysical poetry, that they always try to create an argumentative tone. They are always argumentative. They try to prove some point, and in order to prove their point, they take their argument farther and farther. They don't allow you to pause and ponder. They don't allow you to be satisfied just with a brilliant image or with a brilliant comparison, but they take forward their argument. So therefore, this argumentative nature is very important. Please write down. Argumentative tone is another important feature of metaphysical poetry. Apart from what we already discussed, their freshness of their imagery, their conceit, which Dr. Johnson was critical about, but T.S. Eliot has a lot of appreciation for the metaphysical conceits, their comparisons, how they compare things where apparently we don't find any similarity. We will look at T.S. Eliot later on. And if you read canonization, which is in your syllabus, I should refer to canonization as well. You can find that what Dr. Samuel Johnson says, that their verse is rough, they are not melodious. And in canonization, just give me a few minutes to find out canonization. Yes. So in canonization, you find that roughness of metaphysical poetry, which has also been referred to as the strong lines. They don't care for melody. They don't care for the traditional diction. They don't care for the traditional versification or the systematic pattern, meter or rhymes. So I read these lines. Please take a listen. For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love, or chide my palsy, my gout, my 5 grey hairs, or ruined fortune's flout. With wealth you state, your mind with arts improve, take you a course, get you a place, observe his honor or his grace, or the king's real or stamped face, contemplate what you will approve, so you will let me love. We will look at this poem later when we read the text in detail. But as of now, I'll tell you, look at the first line, for God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love. Do you think that this is an usual beginning, or this is a very commonplace? Definitely not. This is quite unusual, abrupt. For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love. This is the abrupt beginning, and their colloquial use of language. The language is conversational. They don't care for melody. Okay, and the paradoxical element of metaphysical poetry, which Clint Brooks has explained in detail in the Heresy of Paraphrase, as I mentioned, that you can see here how John Dunn is paradoxical, because he is talking about palsy, gout. Okay, palsy is paralysis, gout is a joint pain, gray hairs, and ruined fortunes. So these are old age, misfortune, things which are related to old age, gout, paralysis, gray hairs, and he is talking about love. So in the context of love, he is talking about old age. This is quite paradoxical. This is quite something that strikes as unusual, because you don't refer to old age in the context of love, because love is youthful. Love brings in mind young people, young age. But here John Donne is comparing, he is bringing the context of old age while talking about love. So conversational style, if you continue reading this, you find that the entire poem is built on a conversational style. But in this conversational style, this is one thing that we got to note, there is a certain male dominance. You find this in To His Coy Mistress as well, Andrew Marvell's, that the male voice dominates. The female voice is not allowed to speak. The female, the counterpart, is not allowed to speak. They are writing love poems, and love poems should be sweet. And Love poems should be melodious. I mean, this is our commonplace understanding that love poems are sweet, they should be melodious, they talk about young age, where lover and the beloved, they engage in fine conversation, or they engage in, like if you read Spenser's, one day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains spray. Vain man, said she, that dost in vain essay a mortal thing so to immortalize. For myself like to this decay, and eke my name shall be white likewise. You find here the lady love is replying to the lover, and they're like, engaged in a sweet conversation, though there is certain speculation about mortality of love, that love will not stand, love will the lady is actually cynical about this, that myself will be destroyed by time, my name will be wiped out, so how can our love be immortal? And the poet says that our love will be immortal. If the waves come and wash your name away, I will write your name in the glorious heaven, and your name will be therefore forever there. Your name will be immortalized in my verse. As I just read out the couplet where the poet says, whereas when as death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live and in later life renew. So the poet is confident that whereas when as death shall all the world subdue, death will control all the world. This is Spenser. Okay, Spenser's Amorety sonnet sequence. Whereas when as death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live and in later life renew. And Shakespeare also has almost the same thing to say in, as you know, that this is probably sonnet number 18, shall I compare thee to a summer's day. The poem ends with a beautiful couplet. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives these and gives life to thee. So you find that the idea of the immortality of love, that love will not be destroyed. Even time will not be able to destroy true love. If love is true, it will continue. In later lives, it will renew again and again. So love is immortal, love will continue. So Shakespeare also has the same thing to say. So long as men can live or eyes can see, so long lives these and give life to thee. But how Dunn is doing this? Now Dunn also has the same idea of the immortality of love. He also has the same passion that love will not be destroyed by the ravages of time. But how Dunn is doing the same thing, I will ask you to now read this poem. Please take a note. This is another very important poem that you have to read to understand John Donne. I'll tell you one thing, that when you read a particular poet, don't read just one poem that is in your syllabus. You have to read the major poems by that particular poet you are going to understand. Because without understanding at least a few major poems, you will never understand how a poet thinks, or what are the ideas that the poet actually deals with, and how he deals with his ideas. Okay, so I will read this stanza. This is the last stanza from the poem called The Good Morrow. Please write down The Good Morrow, which is a love poem once again, a metaphysical love poem. These are the last few lines. My face in thine, thine in mine appears, and true plain hearts do in the faces rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres, without sharp north, without declining west? Whatever dies was not mixed equally. If our two loves be one, thou and I, love just alike in all, none of these loves can. Okay, so I'll ask you to take a note of this poem, The Good Morrow, by John Donne. These are the last few lines. My face in thine eyes, thine in mine appears, and true plain hearts do in the faces rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres, without sharp north, without declining west? Whatever dies was not mixed equally. If our two loves be one, thou and I, love so alike, that none do slacken, none can die. So if we love equally, if our love is mutually reciprocated, with equal passion, none can slacken, none can die. And therefore he actually refers to alchemy, and he refers to chemistry, where substance which are proportionally mixed, the chemical substance will never wither, will never die, will never slacken. So love is imagined as a chemical process. So this is a chemistry of love. So you can find that this comparison is different from that of Shakespeare or Spencer, where they are using the commonplace ideas. Dunn is using the idea from different fields of knowledge, which we generally not associate with poetry. Okay, so that is the unique feature of John Donne, and it seems sometimes really striking that he was writing in the early 17th century, and he seems to be quite modern in his in his imagery. I mean, modern in the sense that he was quite up to date. He was referring to the world of navigation. The English people during that time, they were exploring throughout the globe, and they were expanding their business all over the world, and how John Donne has captured that, that particular historical phase in the form of his poetry. If you read these lines, for example, this is from the same poem. And now good morrow to our waking souls, which watch not one another out of fear, for love, all love of other side controls, and makes one little room and everywhere. Let she discover us to new worlds have gone, let maps to others worlds on worlds have shown. Let us possess our world, each hath one and is one. So let she discover us to new worlds have gone, let maps to others worlds on worlds have shown. So what you can find, the reference to sea discoverers, the explorers, the navigators, like this was a period of great navigation for the English people. So sea discoverers, they will go to new world, they will discover new hemispheres, they will discover new horizons, they will expand their territory, they will land in new continents, but we don't care, because we have our world, which is complete, which will be our private world, which is not touched by what is happening in the outside world. So very important feature of Donne's poetry is his frequent reference to navigation, exploration, to cartography, to geography, the knowledge that were during his time cultivated a lot. The knowledge of cartography, the knowledge of geography, the knowledge of alchemy, chemistry. Okay, so that is why Dr. Johnson says that they are pedantic. They try to, show their knowledge. They try to make a show of their learnings. But is it genuine? Are they artificial? Are they showing their? Are they taking their references artificially? I don't think that they are artificial, because this is a genuine poetry. I think this is a genuine passion of love that makes the poet refer to the something that is beyond the commonplace. Okay, therefore I think that the metaphysical poets were not artificial. For me, they were genuine. They were really passionate, and they had genuine ideas to deal with. Maybe sometimes they were not melodious, sometimes their rhyme was broken, and that is why Ben Jonson said that Donne should be hanged for not keeping accent. Okay, Donne should be hanged for not keeping accent, because he is breaking the accent. Okay, that is, for Ben Jonson, was an offense, a serious offense. But sometimes Donne could create melody. Sometimes he was really passionate. He wrote really melodious verses, which we will look at in the course of our discussions. We will also look at some of the melodious verses. This poem, The Good Morrow, seems to be more melodious than Canonization. If you judge it on account of melody, this seems to be more melodious than Canonization. And there are poems, certain poems, where Donne is genuinely melodious. So we will look at those poems later on. Now let us continue with our appreciation of Donne with reference to critical tradition. Okay, so I will now take up T.S. Eliot. Please write down this text as well, the name of this text, which you are going to read. You have to read this. I will just refer to a few passages from this text. The Metaphysical Poets by T.S. Eliot. What T.S. Eliot has to say about the metaphysical poets. And I ask you to write down. So please write down the name of this particular text, The Metaphysical Poets by T.S. Eliot, and I will read out a few sections from a few passages from here, and you are going to read it in detail. So please write down this particular portion. T.S. Eliot evaluating metaphysical poetry and John Donne particularly. A thought to Donne was an experience. It modified his sensibility. A thought to Donne was an experience. It modified his sensibility. When a poet's mind is perfectly equipped for its work, it is constantly amalgamating disparate experiences. The ordinary man's experience is chaotic, irregular, fragmentary. The latter falls in love or reads Spinoza, and these two experiences have nothing to do with each other, or with the noise of a typewriter, or the smell of cooking. In the mind of the poet, these experiences are always forming new wholes. So if you look at it closely, what T.S. Eliot has to say that a poet's mind is like a melting pot. A poet's mind is always, amalgamating different experiences, disparate experiences, experiences which are not generally associated by the ordinary. We generally don't associate these experiences, but the poet will do, because a poet has a more sensitive mind. A poet is more sensitive towards his experiences, and a poet can connect the experiences with the help of his power of imagination. So therefore, when a poet's mind is perfectly equipped for its work, it is constantly amalgamating disparate experiences. The ordinary man's experience is chaotic, irregular, fragmentary. The latter falls in love or reads Spinoza, and these two experiences have nothing to do with each other, or with the noise of a typewriter, or the smell of cooking. In the mind of the poet, these experiences are always forming new wholes. So because the poet has an organic sensibility, what is called a unifying sensibility. Now T.S. Eliot contrasted this with what he called dissociation of sensibility. Okay, I will also find out this particular part and read it out. Please take note of this term, dissociation of sensibility. Okay, so what is dissociation of sensibility, which T.S. Eliot used as a charge? He brought it as a charge against Milton and the tradition of poets who followed Milton, that they manifested certain dissociation of sensibility, that for them their thought and their experience were not always unified. Okay, let me just find out these lines. I'm just trying to find out. I have not underlined, so give me just 1 or 2 minutes. So let us also look at this, what T.S. Eliot has said about dissociation of sensibility. We may express the difference by the following theory. The poets of the 17th century, the successors of the dramatists of the 16th, possessed a mechanism of sensibility which could devour any kind of experience. They are simple, artificial, difficult, or fantastic, as their predecessors were. In the 17th century, a dissociation of sensibility set in. Please write down. In the 17th century, a dissociation of sensibility set in, from which we have never recovered. And this dissociation, as is natural, was aggravated by the influence of the two most powerful poets of the century, Milton and Dryden. So for T.S. Eliot, John Donne and the metaphysical school of poets, they have a unification. They could unify their thoughts and their feelings, their experiences, but the great poets like Milton and the Restoration poet Dryden, and those that followed Milton and Dryden, like Tennyson and Browning, they could not unify their sensibilities. So there was a gap between their thought and their feeling. Now this idea of dissociation of sensibility has come in for a lot of criticism in recent times. Many critics feel that T.S. Eliot actually was somewhat prejudiced against Milton, and therefore he was trying to devise some kind of negative theory against Milton and the tradition of Milton. We have to form our own judgment. We will read, we'll look at it later with reference to Milton's poetry as well, but we will look at it later. As of now, you just write down these two terms, dissociation of sensibility, and the opposite to it, unification of sensibility. For T.S. Eliot, the metaphysical poets should be highly valued because they manifest what he finds as unification of sensibility, as opposed to Milton, who showed a dissociation of sensibility. Now we got to remember that Milton was a 17th century poet. He was also writing during the time of the followers of John Donne. Donne died in 1631, and Donne's style was carried forward by the other metaphysical poets, including Abraham Cowley and Thomas Kerry and Andrew Marvell and George Herbert. These poets, the metaphysical poets, they were actually overshadowed by the towering figure of Milton. Milton had the preeminence in the field of poetry, writing his long epics, writing his highly Latinized verse, whereas the metaphysicals were writing their kind of colloquial style, conversational style, and they were writing sometimes on amorous topics. So therefore they were not highly valued. They were popular, definitely they were popular during their own time, but not highly valued like Milton. Next century comes Dr. Samuel Johnson with his severe charges against metaphysical poetry, with his complete negativism about the metaphysical tradition. So after Dr. Johnson's negative criticism, because Johnson was a very powerful, preeminent critic, he was not very successful as a poet and a dramatist, but as a critic, he was like, he himself was the judge, the jury, the hangman. He was he had the last say in the field of criticism. So after Dr. Johnson's negative criticism, metaphysical poets went out of favor. They became quite off from the main tradition. They became quite offbeat, and they were not discussed in intellectual circles very much. But it was in the 20th century, after T.S. Eliot's revaluation and Herbert J. Grierson's revaluation, metaphysical poetry has once again come to be important, and they have once again come to find their place in university syllabus and in critical discussions and in the common readers appreciation. Once again we find that metaphysical poets are gaining their popularity. So having said this, we are going to look at, in very short, we will look at the major features of metaphysical poetry. Then I think as of now you can point out at least the certain major features of metaphysical poetry, which I will tell you. So first is their fresh, inventive thoughts, their inventive way of writing. Okay, they were writing in a way which poets before them did not write. Okay, please write down their fresh and inventive verse. Okay, which Thomas Kerry has said, like he has phrased in his lines, the muse's garden with pedantic weeds overspread was purged by thee, and fresh inventions planted. You throw away the old and the traditional verses, and you invent new style. Okay, so fresh, inventive way of thinking, way of writing. Metaphysical conceit. Very important feature of metaphysical poetry is their use of conceit. And here I will ask you to write this down. This is from Helen Gardner's book, which I have already suggested you. You are going to find out this book. If you have in the library, please find out, or else you have to somehow collect this book. If you don't have, you can tell me, I will give you a copy, Xerox copy of this. So what Helen Gardner has to say about metaphysical conceit. According to Helen Gardner, that metaphysical conceits are, please write down, yes, a brief comparison can be a conceit if two things are unlike. A brief comparison can be a conceit if two things are patently unlike, or which we should never think of together, are shown to be alike in a single point in such a way or in such a context that we feel their incongruity. So we are more impressed by the incongruity of the comparison, by the dissimilarity of the comparison rather than by the similarity of it. So the similarity is less here, and we are more impressed by their incongruity, that is the dissimilarity of the two things that are compared together. Okay, so a metaphysical conceit is therefore, according to Gardiner, is like a spark made by striking two stones together. It's like a spark made by striking two stones together. After the flash, the stones are just two stones. Okay, so it is like, striking two stones together, which gives a sudden flash, and you are suddenly, surprised, you are suddenly struck, but then the stones are just stones. Okay, I should say that metaphysical concepts impress me with their wit that they contain. If we think deeply about these concepts, I think we find that there are some deeper, similarity. There are some deeper understanding that they are actually hinting at. Therefore, we have to, think deeply in order to understand the metaphysical concepts. There are many examples which we will be discussing later on when we read the particular texts. Okay, so please write down. A conceit is like a spark made by striking two stones together. After the flash, the stones are just two stones. Okay, so metaphysical conceit. Okay, another important feature of metaphysical poetry we have discussed, their conversational style, abrupt beginning. Please write down conversational style, abrupt beginning. Okay, should I write? I think maybe I should write these points. Okay, please write down with me. So first is there fresh, inventive thoughts. Fresh, inventive thoughts and style. Number two, use of conceits, conceits, use of conceits. What is a conceit? Conceit is what Dr. Samuel Johnson says. They are like similarity in awkward places. They are like heterogeneous ideas yoked by violence together. For T.S. Eliot, conceits are a sign of organic sensibility, that you find similarity where ordinary people don't find similarity. Therefore, it shows that you are a genuine thinker, you are a genuine poet. Okay, so critical differences. Point number third, their abrupt beginning. Very often the metaphysical poems begin on an abrupt note. They begin suddenly, abrupt beginning. Okay, if you read this poem, for example, The Sun Rising. Okay, busy old fool, unruly sun, why dost thou thus through windows and through curtains look on us? Must to thy motions lover seasons run? Saucy pedantic wretch, go chide let schoolboys or sour parentheses. Go tell country huntsmen that the king will ride, call country ants to harvest offices. Love all alike, no season knows, nor clime, nor hours, days, months, which are the rags of time. So, as you can see, the theme is the immortality of love, that love all alike, no season knows, nor clime, nor hours, days, months, which are the rags of time. Love is not controlled by hours, days, months, because love has no time. Love is timeless, love is immortal. But at the same time, how he is doing this is a commonplace Elizabethan theme, that the immortality of love in the face of time, in the face of ravaging time. But their style, how Dunn is doing this, abrupt beginning, colloquial style. He is not doing it melodiously like Shakespeare or Spenser. He is not using the Elizabethan commonplace, comparisons or metaphors. But his metaphors are different. His metaphors are genuine. His metaphors are, I think, striking. So therefore, he continues this. We will discuss. We will read this later on. Okay, so abrupt beginning. You can find that there is a sudden beginning. Busy old fool, unruly sun, why dost thou through curtains and windows call on us? So there is no, melody here, so as to say, in the traditional sense of the term, and it is humorous, it is witty, it is sarcastic, that the poet is calling the sun busy old fool, unruly sun. So this is quite, a part of Dunn's sarcasm, is part of Dunn's sense of humor. Okay, so abrupt beginning and conversational style should go with this. These 2 points are together. I should write them together. Conversational style. As I told you, though it is a conversational style, but it is always, metaphysical poems are built as as monologues, because here one person speaks, only the poet speaks, only the male voice speaks, the female, the counterpart, the lady love, has no reply. She is not allowed to reply. And the same pattern you find in To His Coy Mistress, in John Donne's poetry, in other poems, love poems of metaphysical poetry. We will look at those later on, but as of now, just making some brief references. Okay, so abrupt beginning, conversational style. Please write down a reference to exploration. Please write down exploration, navigation. Okay. They apply knowledge. The metaphysical poets apply knowledge from diverse fields. Diverse fields. Please write down D-I-V-E-R-S-E. Diverse fields. I don't have space here to write. Diverse fields, including, philosophy. Definitely there is philosophical references in metaphysical poetry, chemistry, and cartography, geography. There are mythological references, there are historical references, and there are biblical references. If you read this poem, I'm just trying to make this point. There are reference to diverse fields of knowledge. For example, look at this poem, The Good Morrow, once again. Dunn refers to the this is a biblical reference. I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we loved, were we not weaned till then, but sucked on the country pleasures childishly, or snorted we in the seven sleepers' den. It was so, but this all pleasures fancies be, if ever any beauty did I see, which I desired and got, it was but a dream of thee. The reference to the seven sleepers. Okay, the reference to the seven sleepers, who were seven Christian brothers who were supposed to have slept for a long time in order to, in a cave, they were sleeping for a long time in order to avoid the persecution by the non-Christians. And when they woke up after many centuries, they found the entire world converted to Christianity. The entire known world was converted to Christianity. So we were sleeping like the seven sleepers in the cave. Before we came to love, we had no consciousness, we did not know each other, we were oblivious. But now our souls are waking up to greet each other. So therefore, good morning to each other. Let's say good morning to each other's soul. Okay, so the reference to this kind of mythological allusions, there are biblical allusions, there are allusions from contemporary history. You have reference to geography, the age of exploration, navigation, and cartography. So therefore, chemistry. So they are applying knowledge from diverse sources, the metaphysical poets. And that is why Dr. Johnson said that their whole endeavor is to display their knowledge. They wanted to show their knowledge. But this can be quite problematic, because Thomas Kerry has said that, if you read Thomas Kerry, those lines that I just told you, that Dunn was clearing the muse's garden of the pedantic weeds. So Dunn was creating a more natural poetry rather than the pedantic poetry of the Elizabethans. Now, who is correct? We have to judge on our own. Okay, so knowledge from diverse fields. Okay, this is another feature of metaphysical poetry, and I will continue writing here. I hope you have completed. They use a diction that is quite ordinary. Okay, so their use of ordinary words, day-to-day words, that is, you can say ordinary or commonplace words. Their use of ordinary and commonplace words. Okay, but when they are using ordinary commonplace words, you have to remember that this was Elizabethan time, when poets were supposed to write in a stilted diction. They were supposed to write verses with refined diction. Any unrefined word or any ordinary word would not be included by a poet like Spenser or Sidney. They were very careful about their diction, the kind of word that they are selecting, and they would carefully select their words. But Dunn and his followers, they were rather careless in their diction. They used ordinary diction, commonplace words, day-to-day, regular, everyday words. Okay, so this is very important. But while doing so, they are extremely epigrammatic. They are paradoxical. Okay, so I will tell you to concentrate on this feature, very important, that their paradoxical style. Okay, paradoxical. They're using paradoxical, style. Okay, this you find in canonization. Okay, where the poet compares the lovers with dove and eagle. We are the eagle, we are the dove. So dove and eagle, birds of two contradictory nature. How can doves and eagles be one? Or how can we be dove and eagle at the same time? Because eagle is a bird which flies high in the sky. It soars high. It's a predatory bird. On the other hand, dove is a peaceful bird which keeps very low. It is a very I should say it's a symbol of peace. But the poet says, we are the eagle, we are the dove. We got to remember that dove also has a Christian association. It's a Christian allusion as well, because in the Bible, if you read the Bible, during Christ's when Christ was being baptized in the river Jordan, a dove was supposed to have descended from the heaven and sat on Christ's shoulder. That was a sign of Christ's divinity. Okay, so we are the eagle, that is, we are the predatory bird, we are adventurous, we are powerful, we are strong. At the same time, we are the meek and mild dove. So this is the paradoxical feature of dance poetry, and dance poetry is abounding in paradox. There are multiple uses of paradox in the poem Canonization. If you read Canonization, I will explain Dunn's use of paradox with reference to Clint Brooks. Okay, we will look at this later when you read the text in detail. So their paradoxical style, use of paradoxical imagery or paradoxical situations. Okay, and Dunn's, please write down Dunn's witticism, his sense of humor. Okay, Dunn's witticism, sense of humor. Dunn was a ready wit. He was trained at law. He actually completed his law degree from the Cambridge University, Inns of the Court. But he could not take his degree because of certain reasons. He could not, because that worth taking would involve certain that is called the worth of supremacy, which would involve certain words which would go against his Catholic faith. He was a Catholic, as I told you, in a Protestant England, so he could not take his degree because he was not. His mother actually forbade him to proclaim that worth of supremacy. So he could not take his degree, but he was a lawyer, and lawyers are argumentative. They are rather witty. So therefore, that that witticism, that argumentative tone is dominant in Dunn. We will look at these, when we read the text. Okay, and his dramatic element of Dunn's poetry. His argument is built on a dramatic pattern. So, dramatic element. Dramatic element in his poems. Okay, so we got to remember that Dunn was a frequenter to the theatre. He was a lover of theatre. He used to go to the theatre. So that is quite understandable why he had this dramatic, element in his poetry. And we got to remember that this was a time of, Shakespeare, because Dunn was a contemporary of Shakespeare. Dunn outlived Shakespeare by 15 years. Shakespeare died in 1616 and Dunn died in 1631. But they were contemporaries. They were writing at the same period. Okay, and it was a time of great Elizabethan theatre. Okay, English theatre was glorious during Elizabethan time. So Dunn was not out of this, excitement about the theatre. So he was a lover of theatre, but he did not write, dramatic poetry. But his poetry is dramatic. Okay, so dramatic element is very often dominant in Dunn's poetry. Okay, there are a few other features which at this moment we don't have time enough to discuss in this class. So we will continue our discussion in the next class. For this class, I will ask you, just give you one or two assignments which you are going to prepare and you are going to bring in the next class. Okay, please write down this assignment. Just one or two assignments I'll give you. Okay. In what sense John Dunn is different from his contemporaries? Or in how many ways John Dunn is different from his contemporaries? Shakespeare, Spenser, Sir Philip Sidney. Okay. So in how many ways John Dunn is different from his contemporaries like Shakespeare, Sidney or Spenser? Okay, and please write down another assignment. Critically comment on Dr. Samuel Johnson and T.S. Eliot's evaluation of John Dunn's poetry. Critically comment on Dr. Samuel Johnson and T.S. Eliot's evaluation of John Dunn's poetry. Okay, so you will bring this in the next class, and therefore, okay, we will meet in the next class. Thank you. Bye for this class. Bye.